大家都知道，二省目前经济不好，失业人口众多。NDP 政府推行的高税率、大量举债、抬高赤字等杀鸡取卵的愚民政策，很有可能把已经举步维艰的二省经济推向崩溃。没有工作，劳工外流，房价不振，省民债务高筑，人民的财产缩水。二省实在是不能再承担 NDP 2019年大选再做4年的风险。刚刚 PC 和 YROS 合并以后的联合保守党 UCP 就是为了打败 NDP 而生的，是挽回二省经济和未来最有效直接的办法。今天我有幸来到 UCP 的竞选办公室，采访目前最有希望当选 UCP 党魁的 Jason Kenney 先生，看看他是怎么样看待二省的前途和我们关心的二省的经济的问题，还有一些什么话他是想跟我们华人社区说的。
阿省的华人朋友们，为了阿省的明天，请投我一票。
Thank you, Jason, for taking time to meet us today to answer the questions the community had and address the concern the community had. So just before we start, do you have anything to say to the Chinese community?
Absolutely. Alberta is fortunate to be the home to hundreds of thousands of people of Chinese origin because they are people with an amazing work ethic, deep sense of entrepreneurship. Chinese immigrants to Canada are 3 times more likely to start a business than somebody born in Canada. You know, people who come here from China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, with people of Chinese ethnicity, come here to pursue economic opportunity so that their hard work can translate into success. They can pass on a better future to the next generation. Unfortunately, right now in Alberta, that opportunity society, this prosperous Alberta people immigrated to, is under attack by a socialist government, the NDP government, that has done deep damage to our economy by raising taxes on everything, higher income and business, payroll and property taxes, and the carbon tax. Massive new regulation and red tape that's helped to scare away tens of billions of dollars of investment, higher labor costs, and higher power prices coming. All of these things combined have led to a long and deep recession. Many of the hard-working Chinese immigrants I know in Alberta have become unemployed, including professionals who were working as engineers and in high-paid jobs. And many who are entrepreneurs are barely hanging on to their businesses. Some have lost those businesses. This is wrong. So we need to renew the what we used to call the Alberta Advantage, lowest taxes, most pro-investment environment in Canada, to recreate economic opportunity and jobs for all Albertans, including the hardworking people in our Chinese community. One other point is, and this is, by the way, why I've worked for the last year to create this United Conservative Party, one big, broad, pro-enterprise, pro-growth party focused on job creation. And we need members of the Chinese community to be involved in this new party. Don't sit on the sidelines. Get involved. Help us. I need the support of the community to become a strong premier who can renew our economy. But we also need people to get involved in the policy process and electing candidates. We hope to have many qualified candidates of Chinese origin running for the Conservative Party in the next provincial election. Last point is, I've worked for years with the Chinese community as Minister of Immigration. I welcomed over 150,000 permanent residents from China to Canada. I oversaw a tripling of immigration rates to Alberta. I oversaw a 400% increase in the number of study permits and visitor visas issued to Chinese citizens coming to Canada. I worked on things like creating pre-departure orientation for Chinese immigrants coming to Canada in China. We opened additional consular offices in China. I also worked with Prime Minister Harper on things like the apology for the Chinese head tax, an issue that had long been a kind of a dark moment in Chinese-Canadian history. So these are things I have done with the community, and as Premier, I would look forward to working with the community to build a strong Alberta with a vibrant economy.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the Chinese community, thank you for all the contribution and what you have done in the past to the Chinese community. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah. Now we need your help
Please.
to fix the Alberta economy, right? So from the committee, we do have a few questions that we would like to ask you. Yeah. So to start, recently a number of international companies have pulled the investment from Alberta oil and gas operation, and many might follow suit. So what would you do if you elected the Premier to reverse the check?
The number one job of a new Conservative Alberta government will be restoring investor confidence. In the past year, nearly $40 billion of foreign capital, foreign investment has left Alberta, mainly going from the Alberta oil sector to the oil sector in other jurisdictions. So it's not about the oil price, it's something specific about Alberta. Why are the companies moving money from billions from here to Kazakhstan, Alberta to Texas, Alberta to Iran? It's because we have made ourselves uncompetitive. So we will have to first repeal the carbon tax, then reduce other taxes that the NDP has increased. Thirdly, show a credible plan to balance Alberta's budget, because the huge deficits represent uncertainty for investors. We will stop the NDP's increase in labor costs that are also making us uncompetitive. Stop their huge multi-billion-dollar subsidies for unreliable forms of power production that will raise power prices. That's also scaring away investors. We will repeal their change to labor legislation that is undermining a workplace democracy and making, again, another thing against businesses and investors. We will fight hard to get pipelines built, actually not just approved, but built, so that we can get a fair global price for our oil products, maximize the value of this great resource. I would like to use the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program to attract people who intend to create successful businesses in Alberta, to use that human capital as an engine of economic growth. And then I would go all around the world and let the investment community know that Alberta is open for business again.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so that actually answered a couple of questions that we're going to ask, but we still go over that. So secondly, what policies would you adopt to promote foreign investment in Alberta? Particularly Chinese investment in the oil sector.
So we need foreign capital from all around the world. We need to restore investor confidence, and that includes, of course, with trade and investment bilaterally with China. You know, China has been the fastest growing economy in the world, with the emerging middle class and a huge growth in energy needs. And we can help to satisfy those needs, for example, through liquefied natural gas, as well as our petroleum. So this is why we need a Pacific Ocean access for our liquefied natural gas and petroleum. The British Columbia government is talking about blocking the approved pipeline expansion to the West Coast. If they seek to do that, if they try to break the law by blocking that approved pipeline, I will impose repercussions. There will be retaliation on British Columbia if they do that. They must understand that Canada is a free trade zone. It is an economic union. This is a country of laws. They cannot stand in the way of legal decisions that have been made or the free trade of our products. So we will do everything we can to ensure the export capability of these products to China, which would massively increase Alberta-China trade. And obviously we want Chinese entrepreneurs to help us build the Alberta economy. Bring not just their financial capital, but their human capital too.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So how to enhance the cooperation and the bilateral exchange between Alberta and China for economy, trade, and sciences and technologies exchanges?
Yes, so I would be very open as Premier to exchanges of that nature, cultural, technological, and otherwise. I think our universities are already doing a lot of academic and research exchanges. We could probably do more on the cultural front, but I would certainly be very open to working with the Chinese community on those things.
Yeah, thank you. So, as former longest-serving immigration minister, do you have any thoughts about the how best to attract international talents to help recover Alberta's economy. For example, would you consider expanding provincial nominee program to attract more foreign skilled workers, oil and gas investors, and international students to Alberta?
First, just some context for the viewers. The provincial nominee program is an allotment given to the province by the federal government, because the federal government is ultimately controls immigration. Right. But when I was minister, we gave Alberta we went from 800 provincial nominee positions for immigrants to 6,000. So this is why when I was minister in the Harper government, immigration to Alberta nearly tripled as a result. So now the federal government has capped the number of provincial nominees, so we can't expand it without their consent. So we're at about 5,500 principal economic immigrants who can come through that program. Of course, they can bring dependents, spouses and children. So typically it's about 18,000 a year coming through that program. So I would want, while we cannot unilaterally increase the number, I would want to ensure that we are using that Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program to get some of the best and brightest, and entrepreneurs as well. I'm not sure that we are doing that. One idea I have, Frank, is to take maybe 500 or 1,000 of those positions and set them aside for bright young people who have advanced degrees from some of the world's leading research universities. For example, there are tens of thousands of brilliant Chinese students at leading American universities who have attracted venture capital to do startup businesses, but they cannot get their green cards. They cannot get permanent residency in the United States because the American immigration system is a mess. So I would like to turn Alberta into a magnet for those brilliant young students, and Chinese and others, to come to this country, to come to this province to start to do their startups here. Many of them would like to do that in North America. If they can't do it in the United States, do it in Canada, do it in Alberta. I think that's one way we could create a kind of critical mass of brilliant young people backed by venture capitalists to create a kind of Silicon Valley North in Alberta.
That's a brilliant idea. Thank you. Yeah. So how do you deal with outsourcing engineering jobs in the engineering industry?
I've spoken to so many engineers who immigrated to Alberta. They got there, very patiently went through the process of getting their certification, their license to practice as engineers. Sometimes that meant going all the way back to university again. They had a Chinese engineering degree, then they had to get a Canadian one to get their license. And they spent years doing this. And then we're maybe working in the energy sector, and then in the last 2-3 years, thousands of them have lost their jobs. And part of the reason is obviously the general downturn, but also some of this is outsourcing, where work is being done more cheaply by engineers in China, India, and elsewhere. So I feel very badly for these folks. Now, there is, however, no legal way. There is no legal way to block companies from outsourcing work overseas. To do so would be in violation of the World Trade Organization's rules and all of our, like for example, the Chinese government and the Indian government would immediately object if we do have no legal power to stop it. So the solution has to be restoring investor confidence in Alberta, bringing those tens of billions of dollars of investment back to this province so that the energy companies are expanding again, hiring back those engineers to do the work here. Because I often hear that the work being done overseas is of lower quality. It's not, there's not the same standard, there's not the same supervision. They're separated from where the work's actually being done. Often the drawings have to be redone back here in Canada. So, but the key thing is those companies will not be in a financial position to rehire the unemployed Alberta engineers, including those of Chinese origin, unless we recreate economic growth and investor confidence. That has to be job number one.
Okay, awesome. Next question, how would you restore the Alberta advantages that you just talked about?
First of all, repealing the carbon tax. Bill number 1 of a Conservative government in Alberta will be the Carbon Tax Repeal Act.
Thank you.
And then if Mr. Trudeau seeks to impose a federal carbon tax on Alberta, we would sue him because we believe it's a violation of Alberta's jurisdiction under the Constitution. We would join Saskatchewan's legal challenge. Second point, we have to get other tax rates down, including business taxes, to attract investment capital to Alberta. Thirdly, stop their increase in wage costs, stop their increase in power prices, and then fourthly, fight hard for pipeline construction so we get fair market price for our oil and gas. And finally, show a credible plan, implement a credible plan to get back to a balanced budget. Right now we are on track for a $95 billion provincial debt by the year 2020. That means we'll be spending $2-3 billion a year on interest payments. That big debt and deficit is one of the reasons we have lost investor confidence and the Alberta advantage, because if you're constantly borrowing more, that implies to investors that you're going to be raising taxes in the future. Finally, we need to massively reduce the regulatory burden, the red tape burden on the Alberta economy. Many people tell me that in the oil sector, it takes over a year for approval in Alberta, where the same thing can be approved in Texas in 1 week. So we have over-regulated ourselves. I would appoint a minister whose specific job is removing unnecessary and redundant regulations from Alberta to let business do business again.
I'm sure, yeah, that could fix a majority of the NDP problems. Yeah. So the next one, how do you plan to diversify Alberta's economy? Because you know right now we heavily rely on oil and gas. So what's your thoughts?
First of all, the good news. 40 years ago, Alberta's economy was 40% oil and gas. Now it's under 20%. So the Alberta economy has diversified, even when oil and gas has grown. But other sectors like services and construction grew faster. And that growth in our economy, outside of oil and gas, was driven mainly by population growth. So in the same 40 years, our population has more than doubled. And that's partly because of folks like yourself who immigrated to Canada. The majority of the Alberta Chinese community immigrated in the past 30 years. Every time they came and they bought a house or a house was built for them, and then they created demand for services, or they started their own businesses. That's the kind of economic activity that has led to the diversification of our economy. So, but the question is, why did all these people come to Alberta? Why did 1.5 million people immigrate here in the last 30 years? It's partly because of the prosperity created by our oil and gas sector. Right. So when people talk about diversification, Frank, yes, I don't want us to ignore or think that oil and gas is a problem. It's a great asset. First point, let's maximize the value of the asset of oil and gas by getting those pipelines built, because this represents hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth. Let's bring back the foreign investment to our oil and gas sector to create those good paying jobs for the engineers and others, because then they are consuming services, they're creating other economic growth. Second point, let's create the right overall economic conditions for growth. And what does that mean? It means getting our tax rates back down, cutting the regulatory burden, stopping the increase in labor and power prices. And so it's recreating what we used to call the Alberta advantage, where Alberta was the best place in which to invest for entrepreneurs. So it's the overall economic policy. Last point, what I don't think we should do is to take your tax dollars and have politicians risk your money on specific so-called investments, because you would have a better politicians spending your tax dollars in the investments in choosing your winners or losers in the economy. You might as well give them money to go and play roulette at the casino.
That's right.
The politicians they're not spending their own money, they're spending your money. So in Alberta in the late 1980s, the government tried to do that. They took tax dollars, they put that money into loans, grants, and loan guarantees in particular companies in an effort to diversify the economy. It was a disaster. They lost $8 billion. Let's not do that. Instead, let's create the right overall economic conditions through low taxes, low regulation, and other costs that are competitive.
Thank you. Yeah, with all those economy strategy, I'm sure we will restore Alberta advantage in the near future.
That's the hope. Yes.
Yeah, once you take office as Premier of Alberta. Yeah.